Have you ever found yourself in a relationship where within just a few weeks you went from being a stranger to the center of someone's world, only to be met with sudden silence, as if you never existed? If that left you confused, anxious, and wondering, what did I do wrong then? You may have unknowingly stepped into the emotional chess game of a narcissist. In today's video, we won't just break down the classic push-pull manipulation tactic narcissists use to destabilize you. We'll go deeper into the psychology behind their calculated silence, what they're hoping to trigger in you, and most importantly, what happens when you don't react the way they expect. If you're currently caught in that cycle or healing from a toxic bond, this video will give you clarity, insight, and maybe a sense of liberation. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're seeking real healing, deep psychological understanding, and empowering truths that can keep you from ever getting pulled back in. And make sure you watch until the end, because the final section will reveal where your true power lies when you simply choose not to play anymore. Have you ever been in a relationship where someone entered your life like a storm, sweeping you off your feet with intense eye contact? Sweet words, overwhelming attention, and a feeling that you were the most special person they had ever met. And then, without warning, silence. No goodbye. No explanation. Just absence. As if you never existed at all. If that left you confused, anxious, maybe even questioning your sanity, then chances are you unknowingly stepped into the psychological trap of a narcissist. What most people don't realize is that this sudden withdrawal isn't random. It's a tactic, a well-rehearsed move in a psychological game. They elevate you emotionally, make you feel chosen, seen, adored, only to suddenly vanish, leaving behind a vacuum. And in that vacuum, they begin harvesting, watching, waiting, and above all, expecting you to react. Will you worry? Will you chase? Will you ask, did I do something wrong? Will you second-guess yourself? Because if you do, you've given them exactly what they want. Proof that they matter more to you than you matter to yourself. Proof that they have the power to destabilize your peace. Proof that you'll abandon self-respect in exchange for reassurance. The narcissist doesn't crave love. They crave control, and more specifically, they crave your emotional dysregulation. Your anxiety becomes their fuel. Your confusion becomes their confirmation, and your willingness to break your own boundaries just to keep the connection alive. That's their reward. If you text them, "Is everything okay?" even softly, you've stepped into their script. They won't respond immediately, maybe not at all. And while you toss and turn in emotional chaos, they rest easy. Because your suffering equals their validation. Your insecurity feeds their ego. And while you spiral in search of meaning, they're recharging off the storm they've created in your mind. This isn't detachment. It's narcissistic supply in its most disguised form. The silent treatment isn't punishment, it's harvesting. The narcissist doesn't need to be loved to feel powerful. They just need to know they still control how you feel. But what happens when you don't react? What happens when they ignore you? And you ignore them right back. No chasing, no emotional fireworks, just quiet, calm, intentional quiet. Suddenly, the narcissist begins to unravel. They become unsure. The script no longer plays out. They begin to wonder, did I misread them? Are they really over me? Am I losing control? From the controller, they become the confused. From the observer, they become the obsessed. Their silence was supposed to draw you in. Instead, yours has pushed them to the edge, and now they're the ones spinning, wondering why their power isn't working. They might even try to return, but not from a place of love. From a place of wounded pride. Because in their world, being ignored is the ultimate insult to their inflated self-worth. When you hold your silence, not in bitterness but in peace, you do something most people never manage with a narcissist. You flip the power dynamic. And in doing so, you expose their deepest fear, not of being alone, but of being irrelevant. Narcissists aren't equipped to face their inner world. Their entire persona is a mask carefully constructed from validation, reaction, and emotional influence. They exist through the gaze of others, through the emotional responses they can provoke. So when they meet someone who doesn't flinch, someone who doesn't play the game, doesn't collapse when they go silent, they're forced to confront a fear they can't name: irrelevance. At this point, the question shifts from, do you still care, to do I still exist? Their sense of presence is maintained by the disturbance they cause in others. And when you pull that power away with calm, steady silence, you unintentionally strip them of what they value most: reflection. And without that reflection, they no longer see themselves. Instead of leaving you anxious, they become anxious. Instead of you spiraling in, overthinking, they start ruminating, thinking about you daily, wondering why the plan isn't working. They may pretend to be fine, act busy, or even find someone new, but none of that is progress. It's a defense mechanism against a new kind of emptiness, the kind that comes when their control no longer works. Your silence, when anchored in clarity, not spite, hits them in the one place they're most fragile. In the narcissist's world, silence only means two things: punishment or manipulation. But your silence doesn't carry either. Yours means freedom. And they can't comprehend that. That's when confusion sets in. Narcissists always believe they have more game than you, that they know what move you'll make next, that you need them more than they'll ever need you. So when you meet their withdrawal with your own stillness, no drama, no panic, you don't just throw them off. You make them doubt their ability to control. And that is deeply threatening to their ego, an ego built on the illusion of invincibility. They're no longer sure of anything. They begin fearing they might actually lose you, not because they love you, but because they're losing the power that made them feel worthy. That's when they shift into another state, studying you. They reread old texts, revisit your social media, watch who you're talking to, wonder if you've moved on. They search for signs that you still care. Because if you've truly let go, if your silence isn't a tactic but a truth, then you're no longer failed supply. You've become an enigma. And narcissists don't rest well around enigmas. At this point, you're no longer the victim in their game. You're the one they can't decode. And that, perhaps more than anything, is what makes a narcissist turn inward, not out of growth, but out of desperate curiosity. However, when a narcissist senses they're losing control, they don't back down easily. Especially if you were once considered high-value supply, someone who gave them intense emotional reactions, someone who once made them feel important. Your prolonged silence will eventually push them to act, and at some point they'll attempt to come back. But not with an apology, not with remorse. They'll return with a harmless smile, a casual, "Hey stranger," a text like, "How have you been?" all carefully wrapped in lightness. But underneath it's a probe, because they're not just returning. They're testing whether they still have access. If you respond immediately, even with something as simple as, "Hi," they'll feel reassured. The game still works. If you're cold or distant, they'll try harder, ramping up affection, reminiscing about good times, acting sweeter than ever. But if you don't respond at all, no reply, no read receipts, no visible reaction, that's when panic sets in. This isn't simple confusion anymore. This is a power crisis. The narcissist isn't coming back to rebuild. They're coming back to reclaim the power they lost. And when they realize the door to your emotions is now locked, that they can no longer slip through your vulnerabilities, they face something they rarely do: failure. For most people, rejection is just part of life. But for a narcissist, rejection is humiliation. It hits the fragile ego they've spent their entire lives trying to protect. And when there's no more game, no more reaction, no more emotional tug of war, they feel invisible. And for them, being invisible means ceasing to exist. At this point, they may react in several ways. Some will pretend to be fine, posting photos, flaunting happiness, showing off success, but it's all secretly aimed at you, hoping you'll notice. Some will attack your image, gossip about you, distort the story, try to devalue you to others, not because you did anything wrong, but because they can't tolerate the idea that you walked away and never looked back. And some will go even quieter, but not to let go. They're lurking, watching, waiting for you to weaken so they can return on their terms. Make no mistake, what you're witnessing is the unraveling of their perceived power over you. You're no longer the puppet reacting to every string they pull. You're the one who cut the strings. And that, for a narcissist, is devastating, because they're not just losing you. They're losing the one thing that made them feel in control. Ironically, the quieter you are, the louder you become in their mind. The more you move on, the more they get stuck. Because this was never really about you. It was always about the feeling of power they once had through you and now can't get back. And when every attempt to re-enter your life fails, when they realize you're no longer reacting, waiting, or even caring whether they show up or not, something begins to unfold that they were never prepared for. They start facing themselves. No more scapegoats. No more supply to manipulate. No more mirrored reactions to help them define their worth. Only one thing remains: the emptiness they've been outrunning their entire lives. A narcissist builds their entire identity like a grand palace, not from bricks of truth, but from reflections in others. They don't know who they are without someone else reacting to them. They don't exist independently. They exist through how you feel about them, how you respond, how much power they still hold in your heart. And when your silence is real, not manipulative, not angry, but liberating, the mirror shatters, and suddenly there's nowhere left to hide. The fear isn't that they lost you. The fear is being exposed, stripped of the illusion that they were ever truly strong, confident, or in control. That's the truth. Narcissists hate most. They are not powerful. They just know how to pretend. They are not secure. They're inflating a hollow self to look unshakable. They don't control everything. They manipulate others to avoid controlling themselves. And your silence, not as a punishment, but as a boundary, becomes the most honest mirror they've ever faced. Some narcissists will fight this stage with everything they have. They'll jump to someone new, throw themselves into a new obsession, distract themselves with work, pleasure, drama, anything to avoid the stillness. Because in the stillness, their own voice becomes deafening. But a rare few, will begin to crack inside. Not because they want to change, but because they don't understand why they're hurting. They ask themselves, why can't I stop thinking about them? Why is this silence haunting me? Why does this time feel different? And in that moment, however brief, a fracture appears in the armor. A tiny crack, but a meaningful one, because for once, their denial isn't holding up like it used to. No, you can't save them. No, you can't heal them. But you can do something most never have the strength to do. Walk away, stay silent, and never look back. Because sometimes your awakening is the first shockwave that shakes them out of their illusion. When your silence has lasted long enough and they realize they can no longer re-enter the emotional space inside you, something interesting starts to unfold. They begin redirecting their need for control from you onto themselves, but not in a healthy, transformative way. Rather, in an obsessive, conflicted, and quietly self-destructive spiral. You see, narcissists aren't used to being left powerless. Their entire sense of self depends on a rhythm. They act, you react. But now you've stopped reacting. And that silence, instead of feeding their usual sense of victory, becomes a psychological white space, a void they have no idea how to fill. At this stage, they're no longer focused on you. They're focused on why you're no longer focused on them. They wonder endlessly, why haven't you come back? Why aren't you saying anything? Why is this time different? And instinctively they begin watching. They sneak a look at your stories. They ask mutual friends about you. They analyze your every silence. And if they find nothing, their mind fills in the blanks. And in that imagination, you become an obsession. The irony is this: they once thought you were weak. They believed you couldn't survive without them. But your steady, unwavering silence, your refusal to engage, has collapsed their familiar script. And now they're no longer manipulating you. They're manipulating their own mind. They begin rewriting the past inside their head. They distort it, justify it, convince themselves, maybe you're just playing reverse psychology. Maybe you still care, but you're angry. Maybe you're just trying to make them suffer. But the truth is you've stopped, and they haven't. And that's precisely why they can't let go. Not because of love, but because they can't understand why they didn't win this time. When a narcissist can't make sense of failure, they don't move forward. They get stuck. And they spiral within their own thoughts. The more they think, the more obsessed they become. And the more obsessed they get, the more they feel. You're winning. And that's intolerable to their ego. You've stepped out of the game, but the game is still playing in their head. By this point, they've lost control, but that doesn't mean they stop. When a narcissist can no longer regain emotional access to you, they instinctively split into two directions at once. On one hand, they openly pursue a new supply to fill the power vacuum you left behind. On the other, they quietly continue watching you as if addicted. And this duality is the clearest proof that they are not okay. The first behavior, finding someone new, is a kind of ego first aid. They're not seeking love. They're not seeking connection. What they're looking for is a new audience. Someone who's easy to impress, easy to manipulate, someone who will quickly restore their sense of being admired, worshipped, or needed. And this often plays out in public. They may post affectionate photos. They may check in at places they once went with you. They may write vague captions about having found the right one or finally getting what they deserve. But make no mistake, you are the audience they're really targeting. This new person isn't the goal. They're a prop, a decoy, a mask to cover the truth they can't admit that they're failing to get a reaction out of you. Why do they make it so public? Because they hope you'll see. They hope you'll feel something: jealousy, anger, regret, anything that shows you're still emotionally attached. One little reaction and the game is back on. But if you don't react, if you see everything and remain silent, move forward, say nothing, their entire performance falls flat. And that stings more than being ignored. It is the public failure of a manipulation attempt. Meanwhile, running parallel to that display is the second behavior, watching you in secret. They won't admit it, but they can't stop. They check your profile with fake accounts. They ask mutual friends for updates. They track your activity silently, hungry for signs. Do you have someone new? Are you truly happy? Have you moved on? Do you ever mention them? And when they see nothing, their mind fills the gaps. And in that imagined silence, you become a mental fixation. They begin wondering, are you that happy without me? Did you really find someone better? Are you telling the story now with me as the villain? What drives them mad is not knowing the answers. For a narcissist, not controlling the narrative means losing identity. They once believed they had you all figured out. They were convinced you couldn't walk away. But when you did, quietly, without drama, without needing to win, the one thing they never expected happened. You stopped being the puppet. You became the one who rewrote the script. And that leaves them not just hurt, but in chaos. This chaos isn't immediately visible. Narcissists are masters of performance. But inside, they're unraveling through a storm of uncontrolled emotions, jealousy over a person they aren't even sure exists. Anger, because you aren't jealous of theirs. Fear that maybe this time you've truly evolved and they no longer have access. In this strange duality, publicly flaunting new supply, privately monitoring you, they are no longer the puppet master. They are the ones spiraling. And the greatest irony is this: the harder they try to forget you through someone new, the deeper their obsession with you becomes. Not because you were the most special, but because you refuse to play by the script. And for a narcissist, that's unforgivable. They won't admit it. But every move from public posts to silent stalking revolves around one desperate question. Are you still affected? And if the answer is no, if you keep walking, stay silent, and never look back, they begin spiraling into a self-made loop of obsession. You let go, but they're still holding on to an old version of you, the one they thought would always be easy to manipulate, and they have no idea that version no longer exists. At the very moment every strategy has failed, every manipulative signal goes unanswered, and every public performance is met with deafening silence, that is when the game truly ends. Not because you made a dramatic statement, but because your complete indifference becomes a finality they cannot override. The narcissist always believed they were the one in control, the one who decides when things start, when they end, and whether someone is allowed to leave. But when you walk away without asking permission, without offering closure, without leaving the door open for their return, when you simply aren't standing there anymore, they're thrust into a reality their ego was never equipped to face: meaninglessness. No more reflection, no more audience, no more opponent to outsmart. Only a void. And this void is unlike any they've tried to fill before. They can't cover it with a new supply because this emptiness has your shape. Not because you're irreplaceable, but because you exited in a way that denied them the ability to continue the performance. You didn't cry, you didn't beg, you didn't slander them, you didn't even try to prove that you're better now. You simply went quiet. And that silence forces them to question the entire script they've always relied on. If they don't need me, then who am I? If I no longer have influence, do I still matter? For the first time, they experience what they used to inflict on others: powerlessness. They may still smile. They may still post photos and speak about their new life. But inside, they feel something foreign and disturbing. Not the loss of you, but the loss of the version of themselves they once saw reflected through your reactions. To the narcissist, their identity is affirmed by their ability to trigger emotional responses in others. When that ends, they no longer know who they are, and thus begins an identity crisis. They might cling to someone new, but it all feels flat. They might try to reclaim their sense of dominance, but it never quite lands. And eventually they realize it's not that you were the best supply. It's that you were the first one who never gave them a chance to reset the cycle. You didn't play the victim. You didn't play the victor. You simply walked off the board. And that made the entire game irrelevant. The more silent you become, the more you say. The further you walk, the clearer the boundary becomes. And the less you react, the more you declare they no longer hold power here. They may still perform. But every character they play now is missing one key element: the former audience. A part of them will always look back, not in love, but in search of the reaction that once defined them. And when it never comes, they're left face to face with the version of themselves that no longer works. That's when the game truly ends. Not because you won, but because you're no longer playing. When the game is truly over, when you no longer play a role, neither the victim nor the victor, but simply the one who has walked away, something profound happens. You no longer have anything to prove. No need to prove you were right. No need to prove you're strong. No need to explain why you went silent, why you didn't return, or why you seemed to disappear from their world. The truth is, you didn't disappear. You came home to yourself. And that's something the narcissist can neither understand nor accept, and most importantly, can never take back. Because what you've reclaimed isn't a petty victory in a psychological tug-of-war. What you've reclaimed is freedom. And true freedom doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need to be witnessed to be real. Real freedom is when you're no longer bound by the need for reaction, justification, or fairness from someone who was never capable of giving it. It's when you realize your silence is not a tactic, but a state of being, a choice, a wordless declaration that says, "I'm back to myself and you have no power here." You don't need to check if they regret it. You don't need them to recognize your worth, because you know your worth doesn't depend on whether they see it or not. Narcissists thrive by inserting themselves at the center of other people's stories. But when you write your own story, one where you are the main character, the healer, the aware one, they no longer have a role in it. And that's the loss that wounds them most. Not the loss of you, but the loss of their influence over you. And for a narcissist, that is worse than being left behind. But for you, it no longer matters, because your journey no longer passes through them. Your journey now is about knowing how to live without needing an apology, trusting your own intuition, no longer seeking approval from those who are incapable of real love, and most of all, holding your peace not because the world is quiet, but because you are grounded. They may go on living in their cycle. They may collect new supply, repeat the same patterns with those who have not yet awakened. But for you, that door has closed. And this time, you don't need to slam it. You just gently close it and walk away. No yelling, no looking back, no regret. Because the only thing you carry forward is you, whole, grown. No longer the version of you that was once easy to manipulate. You are no longer chasing love through pain. You've outgrown the storm not by winning but by waking up. And if you're watching this video, if you've ever felt weak for letting go, remember this. Letting go is not failure. Letting go is the beginning of your real strength, the path back to yourself. Hit subscribe if you need more reminders like this, powerful, healing, and honest. And if you're still in the middle of your journey, remember you are not alone, and you are on the right path. True freedom never comes from the permission of the one who tried to control you. It comes when you give yourself permission to walk away and never look back.